Hello, everyone. I appreciate you giving us some of your time today. Perhaps we can just do a quick introduction. My name is Matthew Orr. I'm the owner and founder of VoIP Tools. And with me today is Adam Orr. He's my eldest son and director of marketing and sales. In any case, we're going to talk a little bit about Recording Manager today. And maybe what we can do is start with what's new with this version. So if you've worked with Recording Manager before, what I want to talk about today is the extensive integration that we have incorporated into Recording Manager with AI features, specifically with OpenAI. The user interface of Recording Manager has been completely rewritten. That means that in some cases, it's going to be 10,000 times faster than the previous version. And when I say 10,000 times faster, that's according to Microsoft. We've spent a lot of effort in this version of Recording Manager to optimize performance, especially for those people who have large number of recordings, like 6 million recordings. 6 million recordings is pretty much impossible to do with 3CX. It was slow with our previous versions, but at least we supported it. Now you'll see that it's much faster. One of the additional features that we've added that's been often requested is visual representation of the audio files. And I'll show you that as we go through. I tend to be a chatty Cathy, so I'm going to try really hard to limit the scope of the discussion because I get excited about this stuff and I'll talk about it all day if you let me. So what we're going to kind of talk about is, in addition to all of these features that we're talking about, I wanted to highlight that there's some differences about managing recordings with 3CX and managing recordings with VoIP Tools. With the 3CX version 20, they've added support for OpenAI, and with the 3CX Management Console, you can do full transcriptions of the recordings, summary, and sentiment analysis. I always have trouble pronouncing that word. With our tool, there are no limits as to the kinds of questions that you can ask about your recordings, and we'll show you a little bit about that. So you're not limited to the three that 3CX gives you. You can have literally an unlimited number of questions. So you might ask it things like, give me a list of appointments, action items, key points. So we'll talk a little bit about how you do that. We also have automated the agent scoring process. In the past, we've always had the ability for someone to listen to the recording and then to score agents on how well they handled particular aspects of the telephone call, like were they knowledgeable, were they courteous, were they able to answer the question, did they remember to inform the caller that the call was being recorded. Those were all things that we could do through a manual process of having somebody listen to the recording and then give the agent scores. Now we don't have to do that anymore. What used to take, well, let's say if it's a half an hour recording, it used to take 15 minutes to listen to the recording if you played it back at double speed. Now you can do the whole process in a matter of seconds without human intervention at all. So we'll show you how that works. With 3CX, it's an all or nothing proposition. You either turn it on, this analysis, this OpenAI analysis of the recordings, or you turn it off. With ours, we're going to give you granular control over which calls are being analyzed, or just allowing you to manually choose, I want to analyze that particular recording. So we'll show you how that differs from 3CX. Perhaps one of the most important ones in 3CX version 20, rights to groups are global. So if you are a manager of groups, then you are a manager of every group. That includes sales, that includes the executive group, that includes human resources. Management is global in 3CX. And I don't think that's what most people want. They want to be able to give the manager of the sales group access to sales related calls and listen to those recordings, but not to the executive group or to the customer service group. So we implemented true group permissions, which was the way 3CX was in version 18, but not anymore. Another one of the changes that 3CX made recently with Service Pack 3 is the removal of instant archiving of recordings. We still support instant archives rather than doing it on a daily basis. With that, let's do a little demo of the latest version of Recording Manager. All right, so this is the Recording Manager main web interface. You'll see that I'm logged in as extension 1001. That's me. And you can see that there's lots of different extensions listed in this leftmost column. And the reason for that is that I am a manager of one or more groups. If I were not a manager of a group, then the only recordings that I would see are my own. What's important is for you to see that it's super easy to find the recording that you're looking for. So simply going in here and typing in an extension number, and that quick, it filters all of those recordings so that it's only showing those recordings made by extension 1010. Now, I could easily search by date. I could search by the caller's telephone number, but you get the idea here. Each row is a different conversation, a different recording. And to look at a specific recording, you click on this icon and it brings up this screen. And from here, we'll kind of run through these settings over here on the side. But you'll notice that there's a recording. This is the original recording, and this is the archived version. So we'll maintain both. So you can have the original recording on the 3CX server, or you can have an archived version that's stored elsewhere, and you have access to both. We also have retention policies, separate retention policies for the original recordings as well as the archive recordings. Let me click on one of these here so that you can kind of see what we're talking about. So this is one of the things that's new about this version of Recording Manager. This is one of the things that QA people have asked for a long time, is that now you can see a visualization of that telephone call, right? And you can also go here and change the playback speed. So if you're a quality assurance person and you want to listen to that recording and manually score agents, you still have that ability to listen to the recording. You can email that recording to a colleague. You can download the recording and place it elsewhere. But these abilities to email and download, these are settings based on your user role. So managers, you may give the ability to email, whereas regular users, you don't. And I'll show you where those settings are made. This little checkbox in the upper right-hand corner, if you haven't seen this before, is an indication that this recording hasn't been tampered with. A banking group in Indonesia said that they wanted us to hash the recordings so that if anybody tampered with the recording, what you'd see here is a red X rather than a green checkbox indicating that the recording is not the way it was when it was originally saved. So the other thing too is that these archives happen instantly, and it includes compression. That's another one of the things that 3CX removed in the latest version. We still provide compression to recordings so that they are now, for the archives, are 1/4 of the original size. I can't tell the difference between the original version and the archived version. So if you've got a lot of recordings and you have regulatory requirements that keep those recordings for as much as 15 years. So for example, if you're an investment brokerage, you have to keep those recordings for 15 years. That's a lot of storage. So reducing that storage down to 1/4 can be a big deal. You can play the original or the archive right from here. You get the visual representation of the recording. You can scroll through that recording as needed. The nice thing about this is that if an agent put somebody on hold, you'd see a long period of time where there was no audio. You could just skip forward to the next part where the call was picked back up rather than having to sit there and wait, because without the visual representation, you have no idea when they're going to pick the call back up. But now you don't have to do that. So like 3CX, we have a full transcription. We've made some enhancements to this right now. It's just one great big paragraph. The next version that will be coming out shortly, this is going to be more like if you remember in high school going into a play practice where on the left-hand side was one speaker and on the right-hand side was the other speaker. That's going to be divided up so that you can easily see who was speaking in that transcription. And the summary. That's some of the things that we can do. Now, these are just examples of the types of questions that you could ask of 3CX. So in this case, I've asked it, give me a list of the key points that were discussed in that conversation. And then if there were any assignments made during that conversation, then it'll give you a list of assignments. If there was an appointment scheduled, it would list it here as well, or several. And then a sentiment score. And one thing that's a little bit different from our sentiment score and the 3CX sentiment score is that we say why they were given the score, not just a simple score. And then these are just other examples of different types of questions that you might ask of the recording. So here's agent scoring. So typical questions might be things like, give the agent a score between 1 and 10 based on their knowledge or their courtesy, or did they remember to inform the caller the call was going to be recorded? How were their communication skills? Were they actively listening? So these are all the kinds of things that you can ask, and it will give you the reasoning behind the score that was provided. And this is all done automatically. You don't have to do anything at all. This just happens when the call is recorded. So how do we do all this stuff? So let's jump into settings over here on the left-hand side and take a look at stuff. So here's our retention policy. So we have a delete policy. This is for the original recording, and an archive policy. The idea here is that you might want to keep recent recordings local on the 3CX server, but maybe this 3CX server is hosted somewhere where you have to pay for the storage. So you don't want to keep 15 years of recordings on that server. So you can have a delete policy for the original recording where you can specify any calls that are older than 2 weeks, automatically delete them. One of the other things that you should be aware of is that before we delete any recordings, if archiving is turned on, we're going to make sure that that archive still exists before we delete that recording, because we never want to be in a situation where you've lost a recording. Even though this is deleting the original recording, it is also going to first verify that the archive exists. And then maybe you have to retain those recordings for 3 years or something like that. So similar process, you specify the path of where that recording can be, and it can be iSCSI SAN, it can be a symbolic link, it can be a network share, it can be a NAS. So anywhere you want to put it, just give it the path, and that'll archive the recordings. And again, you specify the amount of time. So in this case, maybe you only need to keep recordings for 3 years, and after 3 years, you figure nobody's ever going to go look at this recording, so let's get rid of them. So separate retention policies, both for the original and for the archive. Normally, I wouldn't show you this one, but let me kind of explain why I am. Some people want to receive a copy of every recording in a central repository, and that repository may accept emails with an attachment. So I've seen people do that, where a copy of the recording is sent to the person whose call was recorded, but also a second copy is sent to a central repository or a manager or something like that. This is where you would specify your email server settings to send emails. Recording access permissions. This is an important one, particularly with version 20. So if you remember, what I said is that with 3CX, manager rights are global. So if you are a manager, you are a manager of every single group in 3CX. And we thought, no, that is not what people want. So what you do is you select the group, and then you assign who the manager. So it's that simple. You control which recordings people can see simply by doing that. So that's how we handle permissions. Secret digits is all about call centers where they are trying to hide from the agents how to make an international telephone call. So we can restrict what calls that agent's supposed to make and to hide any of these secret digits that we're adding to telephone numbers from reports and from visual aspects of recordings. Web portal. This really is about, remember I told you that there's permissions about who can delete recordings, and you can specify that nobody can delete recordings, or only system admins can delete recordings, or everybody can delete recordings. So you control who can download, who can delete, who can change whose calls are being recorded, who can use the download feature, who can view the logs, those kinds of things. And you can also change the time zone, the default time zone. I didn't show you this before, but if you have staff that are in multiple parts of the world, for example, for us, we have staff in Hyderabad, India, and in New Delhi, India, and then in several time zones here in the United States. And so if they're looking for their recording, they want to see the dates and times based on their current time zone. So this is just where you set the default time zone, and then the users can specify their specific time zone that they want to see. And also dates and times are different in other parts of the world. So in the UK, for example, it's a day, month, year. Anyway, so you can select the culture and it will display the dates appropriate to your particular culture. I didn't show you this, but when you start Recording Manager, you first have to log in with your 3CX extension number, and then you can select whether you want to use the voicemail PIN or the web password. So that's what the web portal part is about. But let's get into the interesting part, and that's the OpenAI stuff. So the first section is just about putting in your OpenAI credentials. So I'm not going to show you that because it's got my OpenAI credentials in there. But you'll look at it and go, oh, I just have to put in my OpenAI key. I'm good. So let's look first at the AI prompts. For those of you, if you are familiar with OpenAI, with 3CX, they don't give you any access, as far as I know, to the actual prompts that they're using to summarize and to give sentiment and those kinds of things. We give you full access to those prompts. So as your skill and mine improve in how we write OpenAI prompts, go in and edit them however you choose. But this is just some examples of here's the question that you're going to ask, and you can associate an icon with that for visual benefit. You can turn it on or off. So if there's a time where you want to pause asking a particular question, you can turn it on or turn it off here. And this is the title of what it will show up on the display screens. So if I want to add a new question, I just click on new, and now I can give it a name and then enter the prompt and then put in an icon for it and click active. And now that's all you have to do. You can ask any kind of question you want. So these are just examples of different, actually some of my staff have added some more in here from what I originally suggested. I think courtesy and knowledge, these are examples of other ones. The point here is that you can ask OpenAI any question you want. Hopefully this is pretty straightforward how you do that. All right, then let's talk about agent scoring questions. It's the same process. The only reason there's a different screen is on one, it's all about general questions about the recording. And then in this section, it's just specific questions that you want to ask about an agent and how they were scored. So I showed you in the example that it went through and reviewed the recording and did things like you could ask it, advise how the agent could better ask for the sale, something like that. And then it would review the telephone call and then provide specific guidance on how this agent could improve their ability to close a sale by offering suggestions. So these are the kinds of things that you can do with OpenAI. There are many companies out there that are offering the ability to do analysis like I just described. How can the agent close sales more successfully? And these are paid services that you subscribe to. So what Recording Mover does is it supports these outside firms that do analysis on your recordings, but they typically don't want all of the recordings uploaded to them to do the analysis. So you might want to select, okay, I only want calls that come in from the sales queue, for example, or I only want to upload recordings from a specific group of employees. So maybe you've hired 4 new salesmen and you just want to upload all of those salesmen's recordings for analysis so that you get a sense of how are they doing. Do they need more training to improve their knowledge scores, or do they need to be let go because their courtesy scores are real low? These are the kinds of things that you can do. In every case that I've worked with these outside analysis companies, they've used FTP. So we will automatically FTP those recordings up to their system. And then you can define, do you want to upload those recordings to that service daily or live, only inbound or outbound, or if you do it daily, at what time of the day? That's what that's all about. And then the last setting is site settings. And this is about personalizing how Recording Manager looks. So if you don't like our blue colors and you want to make it orange like our old version, or green or whatever, you can upload your own icons, change the colors. So this is just about personalizing the appearance of Recording Manager. So these are all one-time things, unless you want to add a new question or something. But our staff will assist you in getting all of this set up and installed and configured, and they'll do training for you. So if you have a new employee and they need to know how to use Recording Manager, you can just reach out to our support team. You have unlimited training opportunities with us, as well as support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now, that's not true of all people. For example, I do go to bed and go to sleep, and our development team is available specific hours of the day. But there's always a support engineer there that can help you if you're having upgrade challenges or getting the void tool server to talk to the 3CX server, those kinds of things. We've got people there to help you all the time. All right. This is a log of all the transactions that take place. Again, this was another bank asked for this. They had a regulatory requirement that kept track of who listened to what recordings. So we look at when somebody's logged in, when they've logged out, what recordings they've listened to, if they've downloaded a recording or emailed a recording. All of that information is logged. Remember, I told you that you could control who has rights to delete recordings. You can turn that feature off entirely so that there is no way to delete the archive ever. The only way that you can delete an archive is through the retention policy. Why I bring this up is that, let's say that I'm a salesperson and I've just talked to our largest customer, and he did something to upset me, and I started cursing at the guy and screaming and yelling and telling him all kinds of really not pleasant things, and then hung up on him. well, what am I going to do as soon as I hang up the phone? I'm going to get fired if somebody hears that telephone call. So the first thing they're going to do is want to go and delete that recording. The fact that we archive those recordings the instant that the call is finished means that you'd have to be superhero to get to that recording and delete it before we've already grabbed a copy, converted to an MP3 file, compressed it down to 1/4 of the original size, and saved that copy over in the archive. It's pointless to try and delete a recording to cover your tracks, because you can set it up so that nobody, even the administrator, can't delete those recordings if you don't want them to. So that's what the log is all about. We haven't talked about this screen yet, but remember I told you that 3CX, this OpenAI integration, is an all or nothing proposition. Well, we didn't think that was a great idea either, because there might be some people that want to have their calls analyzed and some that don't. So this is the original feature that we had. If somebody were to ask you if you had a 3CX system that had 1,000 extensions and the CEO came and said, I want to make sure that every single person in our company has every call recorded, go and make sure that that's happening. How would you do that in the 3CX management console? Well, you'd have to go to each and every extension, select that extension, edit the extension, go to options, scroll down, find the checkbox and say, oh yeah, they're already checked, and go on to the next one. This is how you do it in our system. There you go. You can see who's being recorded and who isn't being recorded. If you want to record everybody, there you go. This will go into the 3CX settings for those extensions and update that checkbox for you automatically. And then if you have specific people that you want to have all of their calls analyzed every single time, you can check this checkbox, and then those people's calls are going to be analyzed. But let's say you didn't want to do anybody's calls automatically, because it could be really expensive if you're 128 simultaneous call 3CX license and a call center. You might have several thousand calls in a day, and do you want to analyze every single one of those? Maybe not. More typically, what's done is you'll have a quality assurance team that will arbitrarily select every 5th telephone call and analyze those. So if you analyze them all automatically, that's going to be expensive, right? So instead, what you can do is you can go to a specific recording. So again, I'll just grab Samuel's here, 1010, and we'll look at this one again. And when I go to transcription, you see this analyze button here? If this one hadn't been previously analyzed, I just click on that button, and we'll just go ahead and let it do its thing, so you get a sense for how long this whole process takes. And let's kind of compare this to what it would take to have a human being do this. So let's take a half an hour telephone call, and let's assume that you're playing it back at twice the speed. So we're at a minimum of about 15 minutes to listen to that telephone call. And then on top of that, we've spent 15 minutes listening to that conversation. Now I have to transcribe it. So I'd have to type out all of that transcription, and then I'd have to summarize it. And that was a lengthy process of summarizing it. And then I'd have to look for any appointments that were scheduled, any action items that were identified, any key points that were done. You get the point, is that going through and analyzing this recording and doing all of the agent scoring would take an hour, 2 hours? How long would that actually take to go through that entire process? So for those of you who have a quality assurance team and you're paying them to listen to every 5th telephone call, you saw about how long it takes. What was that? Maybe 30 seconds for this telephone call? So far, far faster than having a human being do it. And there's maybe a little less of a predisposition on how you would score a particular agent. Now the agent can't go, well, yes, but that QA person has it out for me. Well, now it's kind of handled by AI, and AI doesn't have emotions about people. It's just going to look at the facts and give them a score. But you can go back and you can overwrite those scores. So let me see if we can go to score and look at this. You can come in here and you can change that score if you're a manager. So you don't have to live with the scoring that OpenAI has done. Got a question. Does the transcription work for multiple languages? Oh, that's a great question. So the question was, does the transcription work for multiple languages? And the answer is absolutely yes. And the way I know that is that when my development or QA team are doing testing, they'll make test calls and they'll talk to 3CX or to their colleague in Hindi or Telugu or whatever. And I'll see the transcriptions and see it, and it's using the correct syntax for their language characters and the whole bit. So yeah, that's an important point, and I'm so glad that you asked that question. We've been trying to do stuff like get a transcript voice to text with 3CX for well over a decade. In fact, we had that capability of transcribing voicemails for 6 years before 3CX did. And it's always been a super huge challenge. Over the years, I have gone through countless different voice to text engines, and they've all, without exception, struggled with the 3CX recordings. And the reason is that 3CX saves those recordings in a very minimal quality. I'm trying to be polite. So to a human being, they sound perfectly reasonable. They sound like an old analog telephone call. That's how 3CX saves both voicemails and recordings. And so when you submitted that 3CX recording to these voice to text engines, they all really, really struggled with the low fidelity of the recordings that were made. So when OpenAI came along and I said, well, here's another engine we can try. And I submitted my first recording to OpenAI, I about wet myself because we went from a 70% accuracy to a 99.9% accuracy. The difference in the transcription quality provided by OpenAI is difficult to quantify. It is amazing, amazing technology. I've been doing this kind of stuff this is year 43. So I've been doing this a long time. And I started out in the old days of punch cards on mainframes, and here we are today with artificial intelligence doing things like transcribing and summarizing recordings, and it's a new world. But over this 43 years, I can honestly say that there's a very rare time where the hype about a new technology actually reflects reality. And in the case of OpenAI, I have to say it's one of those unique cases where all of the excitement and hoopla about a new technology actually delivers. OpenAI is an amazing, amazing tool. This is really very, very different than what we've seen in the past. This is really a fabulous technology. And I think it adds a huge amount of value to these recordings. We didn't do the import option. Let's say that you've had 3CX for many years and you've got several 100,000 recordings. How do we get caught up and do all of this analysis stuff? You can do that through our import tool. So it will go in and it will look at all your recordings. It'll look in the VoIP tools database. And this, by the way, is all stored in your infrastructure. None of this is going through VoIP tools at all. Recordings that are sent to OpenAI are sent in an encrypted connection between VoIP tools and OpenAI. And as part of their policy for fair use is that they don't use your recordings for any training purposes. They don't keep a copy of your recording anywhere. So they are HIPAA compliant. If you have any questions about that, they have documentation on their website about how they handle recordings and their use policies of your recordings that you're transcribing. The import tool will go and find all of your recordings. It'll check and see if that original recording is in Recording Manager, and if it isn't, it will import that recording. Then it'll check and see if an archive exists, and if you've optionally turned on archiving, it will archive that recording, and then you can go back and analyze any recordings that you want after the fact. If, for example, you're a 24/7 shop and you need to upgrade your 3CX server and then your recording manager, what happens to those recordings that come in while you're in the process of upgrading your recording manager? That's okay. You just run the import tool and it'll go through and it'll check to make sure that you've got all of your recordings. And if you go into the advanced settings, you can say, don't even look at recordings that are more than a week old. And that way you don't have to scan 6 million recordings. You can choose to just scan and confirm that the recordings are there for any recordings that came in the last week. So it can make that import process run much faster. So just wanted to thank you guys for your time and the fact that you've sat here and listened to me for quite a while. Hope that you found it useful. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to our sales team, or you can go to our website and talk to our staff. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.